Hi guys, welcome back to another deep dive into ancient history. Tonight, we're stepping back nearly 2,000 years to explore one of the most fascinating and well-preserved aspects of daily life in the Roman Empire. We're going to walk through the streets of ancient Pompeii, not as tourists admiring frescoes and mosaics, but as time travelers witnessing the raw, unfiltered reality of human nature in the 1st century. Our destination tonight is the Lupanar, Pompeii's most famous establishment of intimate commerce, where archaeologists have uncovered remarkable evidence of how these businesses operated, who worked there, and what it truly meant to visit such a place in ancient Rome. This isn't just a story about one building or one aspect of Roman culture, but a window into understanding the complex social fabric, economic realities, and human experiences that shaped one of history's most influential civilizations. We'll explore the archaeological evidence, the graffiti left by visitors, the lives of the workers, and how these discoveries have revolutionized our understanding of Roman society. Okay, friends, before you settle in, if you enjoy this kind of deep dive content, then click the like button and don't forget to subscribe. And yes, leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights and turn on the fan, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. To understand what it was like to visit such an establishment in ancient Pompeii, we first need to transport ourselves completely into the world of 79 AD. The Roman Empire was at its height, stretching from Britain to the Sahara, from Spain to the Euphrates River. Pompeii wasn't just any provincial town, it was a thriving commercial center with a population of around 15 to 20,000 people. The city sat in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, which the Romans didn't yet understand was an active volcano. To them, the mountain was simply a source of incredibly fertile soil that made the region perfect for growing grapes, olives, and grain. The prosperity this agriculture brought had turned Pompeii into a cosmopolitan hub where Roman citizens, freed slaves, immigrants, and visitors from across the Mediterranean mingled in the streets, conducted business in the forum, and sought entertainment in the amphitheater and theaters. The streets of Pompeii buzzed with constant activity from dawn until well after sunset. Merchants hauled their goods through the narrow cobblestone roads, their wooden cartwheels creating a rhythmic clatter that formed the soundtrack of urban life. The smell of baking bread wafted from numerous bakeries, mixing with the aroma of garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans loved, and the sweet scent of wine from the many taverns that lined the commercial districts. Street vendors called out their wares in multiple languages, reflecting the international character of this prosperous trading city. Latin dominated, but you could hear Greek from educated slaves and freedmen, Oscan from local Italian tribes, and dozens of other dialects from merchants who had traveled from the far reaches of the empire to conduct business in this vital commercial center. The urban planning of Pompeii reflected sophisticated Roman engineering and administrative capabilities that had developed over centuries of city building throughout the Mediterranean world. The streets were laid out in a grid pattern that facilitated both traffic flow and military defense, with main thoroughfares wide enough for carts and smaller side streets that created intimate neighborhood environments. The city's water supply system was a marvel of hydraulic engineering, drawing water from mountain springs through a complex network of aqueducts, distribution tanks, and underground pipes that brought fresh water to public fountains, private homes, and commercial establishments throughout the urban area. This reliable water supply was essential for supporting the dense population and the numerous industries that made Pompeii prosperous. The sewage and waste management systems of Pompeii were equally sophisticated, utilizing gravity-fed drainage networks that carried waste away from populated areas and into the surrounding countryside, where it could be processed naturally or used as agricultural fertilizer. Public latrines were strategically located throughout the city and were designed as social spaces where Romans would gather to conduct business, exchange gossip, and maintain social relationships while attending to their personal needs. These facilities were often decorated with mosaics and frescoes, demonstrating that Romans saw no shame or embarrassment in the natural functions of the human body and considered these necessary facilities worthy of artistic attention and public investment. The social structure of Roman society was rigid yet complex, with clear hierarchies, but also opportunities for mobility that wouldn't exist in later feudal systems. At the top were the patricians, the old aristocratic families, followed by the plebeians, the common citizens. Below them were the freedmen and freedwomen, former slaves who had earned or purchased their freedom, and at the bottom were the slaves themselves, who made up perhaps 30% of the population. This hierarchy affected every aspect of daily life, including attitudes toward intimate relationships and commerce. Romans had a fundamentally different understanding of personal relationships than modern Western societies. Marriage among the upper classes was often primarily a political and economic arrangement, while emotional and physical satisfaction might be sought elsewhere. This wasn't considered scandalous or immoral in the way later Christian societies would view it, but rather a practical aspect of adult life. The concept of Roman citizenship was central to understanding social relationships and legal protections in ancient Pompeii. Citizens enjoyed extensive legal rights, including the right to vote, the ability to own property, protection from arbitrary punishment, and access to Roman courts. However, citizenship came with obligations as well, including military service, tax payments, and participation in civic duties that maintained the stability and prosperity of the community. Non-citizens, including foreign residents, slaves, and some freed people, had fewer legal protections, but often played crucial economic roles that made them valuable community members despite their limited political rights. The Roman family structure, known as the paterfamilias system, gave the male head of household extensive authority over all family members, including his wife, children, and slaves. This authority included the power to arrange marriages, conduct business on behalf of family members, and make decisions about family property and resources. However, this formal authority was often tempered by practical considerations and emotional relationships that gave other family members significant informal influence over family decisions. Women, particularly those from wealthy families, could exercise considerable behind-the-scenes power through their social networks, economic resources, and personal relationships. Roman education systems varied dramatically depending on social class and gender, but literacy rates in urban areas like Pompeii were surprisingly high compared to other ancient societies. Wealthy families employed private tutors or sent their children to schools run by educated slaves or freedmen, where they learned reading, writing, mathematics, rhetoric, and Greek literature and philosophy. Working-class families might provide basic literacy training for their children, particularly sons who would need these skills for their trades or businesses. Even some slaves received education if their owners believed it would increase their economic value or usefulness in household or commercial activities. The legal framework governing commercial activities in Pompeii was extensive and sophisticated, reflecting centuries of Roman legal development and practical experience in regulating urban commerce. Business licenses were required for most commercial activities, with different categories for different types of enterprises. Tax collection was systematic and efficient, with imperial and municipal authorities maintaining detailed records of business income, property values, and commercial transactions. Contract law provided frameworks for business partnerships, employment relationships, and commercial transactions that protected the interests of all parties, while ensuring that disputes could be resolved through established legal procedures rather than violence or personal vendettas. The Roman approach to intimacy was also shaped by concepts of dominance and submission that permeated their entire worldview. Roman men were expected to be the dominant partner in any relationship, whether with their wives, mistresses, or anyone they might encounter in commercial establishments. This dominance wasn't just physical, but social, economic, and political. A Roman citizen's status depended partly on his ability to maintain this dominant position in all his relationships. For women, the situation was far more complex and constrained. Upper-class Roman women, while they could own property and conduct business, were still expected to maintain their reputation and honor, which was closely tied to their perceived virtue and fidelity. Lower-class women, freed women, and slaves had fewer protections and far more limited options for supporting themselves. The economy of Pompeii was built on trade, agriculture, and manufacturing. The city's location near the Bay of Naples made it a natural port for goods flowing between Rome and the rest of the Mediterranean. Wealthy merchants built grand houses with elaborate frescoes and mosaics, while shopkeepers, craftsmen, and laborers lived in smaller quarters, often above or behind their workshops. The city hummed with commercial activity from dawn to dusk. Bakers started their ovens before sunrise, tavern keepers prepared for the day's customers, and merchants arranged their goods in shops that opened directly onto the street. In this bustling commercial environment, establishments like the Lupanar were simply another type of business, regulated by law and integrated into the economic life of the city. The religious landscape of Pompeii was equally complex, reflecting the diverse population and the Roman practice of incorporating deities from conquered territories into their pantheon. Temples to Jupiter, Venus, and Apollo stood alongside shrines to Egyptian Isis and Persian Mithras. This religious diversity extended to attitudes about physical pleasure and intimacy. Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, was particularly important in Pompeii, and her worship included aspects that celebrated physical pleasure as a natural and even sacred part of human experience. This religious context helps explain why Romans didn't view commercial intimate establishments with the same moral condemnation that would characterize later Christian societies. Public baths were central to Roman social life, serving not just hygienic purposes, but as places for business networking, political discussion, and social interaction. These facilities were elaborate complexes with hot, warm, and cold pools, exercise areas, and spaces for socializing. The culture of the baths, where people of different social classes mingled in various states of undress, reflected Roman comfort with the human body and physical pleasure that extended to other aspects of their society. Understanding this bath culture is crucial to comprehending Roman attitudes toward the more intimate commercial establishments that operated in their cities. Now, let's turn our attention to the Lupanare itself, the building that has become synonymous with Pompeii's most famous form of ancient commerce. Located on Vicolo del Lupanare, just off one of the city's main streets, this two-story structure was purpose-built for its function sometime in the 1st century AD. The name Lupanare comes from the Latin word lupa, meaning wolf, which was slang for a particular type of worker in these establishments. The building's architecture reveals fascinating details about how such businesses operated and how they fit into the urban landscape of ancient Pompeii. Unlike the grand homes of wealthy merchants or the public buildings that dominated the city center, the Lupanare was designed for efficiency and discreet operation rather than ostentation. The location of the Lupanare was strategically chosen to balance accessibility with discretion, reflecting the complex social attitudes that Romans held towards such commercial activities. The building sat on a narrow side street that connected two major thoroughfares, making it easily accessible to customers while avoiding the most prominent public spaces where political and religious activities took place. This location allowed the establishment to serve its clientele without interfering with the more formal aspects of Roman civic life, while still being close enough to commercial districts to benefit from the foot traffic generated by other businesses. The construction materials used in building the Lupanar were typical of Roman commercial architecture, combining practicality with durability in ways that reflected both economic constraints and engineering expertise. The walls were built using opus incertum, a construction technique that used irregular stones set in mortar to create strong, weatherproof barriers that could support multi-story structures. The floors were typically paved with opus signinum, a waterproof mortar mixed with crushed pottery that created durable, easy-to-clean surfaces ideal for commercial use. These construction techniques had been developed over centuries of Roman building experience and represented sophisticated understanding of material science and structural engineering. The interior layout of the Lupanare was carefully planned to maximize efficiency while providing adequate comfort and privacy for customers and workers. The narrow corridor that connected the ground floor rooms was designed to allow easy supervision by management, while ensuring that individual rooms remained private and soundproof. The positioning of doorways, windows, and internal partitions reflected careful consideration of traffic flow, natural lighting, and ventilation that would make the space comfortable and functional even when fully occupied. These design considerations demonstrate that Roman commercial architects understood the specific requirements of different types of businesses and could adapt their techniques accordingly. The ground floor of the Lupanare contained 5 small rooms, each barely large enough for a simple bed and perhaps a small table or chest. These rooms opened directly onto a narrow corridor that ran the length of the building. The doorways were low, requiring most adults to duck slightly when entering, which may have been intentional to create a sense of intimacy and privacy. Each room was equipped with a masonry bed covered with a mattress, and many still show traces of the frescoes that once decorated the walls. These weren't elaborate artistic works like those found in wealthy homes, but simpler paintings that often depicted scenes relevant to the room's purpose. The walls also bear hundreds of pieces of graffiti left by visitors over the years, providing an unprecedented window into the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of ordinary Romans. The masonry beds found in each room were constructed using standard Roman building techniques, with stone or brick platforms that supported wooden frames and mattresses stuffed with straw, wool, or other organic materials. These beds were designed to be durable and easy to maintain, with smooth surfaces that could be easily cleaned and disinfected. The height and dimensions of the beds were standardized throughout the building, suggesting that furniture and bedding were purchased or manufactured according to specific requirements that balanced comfort, durability, and cost considerations. The lighting systems used throughout the Lupanare reflect Roman technological capabilities and the practical needs of a commercial establishment that operated primarily during evening hours. Oil lamps provided the primary source of artificial light, burning olive oil or other vegetable oils in small clay or bronze vessels that could be easily refilled and maintained. These lamps were often decorated with motifs appropriate to their setting, and their placement throughout the building was carefully planned to provide adequate illumination while minimizing fire hazards. Windows in the upper floor rooms provided natural light during daytime hours, but the ground floor rooms relied entirely on artificial lighting due to their below street level position. The ventilation systems incorporated into the Lupanare's design were essential for maintaining comfortable conditions in the small, windowless ground floor rooms that could become stuffy and unpleasant without adequate air circulation. Roman architects used a combination of techniques to address this challenge, including strategically placed vents, the careful positioning of doorways to create air currents, and the use of interior courtyards or light wells that allowed fresh air to circulate throughout the building. These ventilation systems were particularly important in southern Italy's warm climate, where poor air circulation could make indoor spaces unbearably hot during summer months. The water supply and drainage systems serving the Lupanare were connected to Pompeii's municipal infrastructure, demonstrating the integration of such establishments into the city's official commercial and administrative framework. Fresh water was delivered through lead pipes that connected to the main aqueduct system, providing reliable supplies for washing, cleaning, and drinking. Wastewater was carried away through carefully engineered drainage systems that connected to the city's main sewers, ensuring that the building remained sanitary and pleasant for both workers and customers. The sophistication of these systems reflects both Roman engineering expertise and the official recognition of such establishments as legitimate businesses deserving of public services. The security measures built into the Lupanar included both physical barriers and procedural safeguards designed to protect workers, customers, and the valuable cash proceeds generated by the business. Heavy wooden doors could be barred from the inside during closed hours, while the narrow entrance and limited sightlines from the street provided security against unwanted intrusion. The building's proximity to other commercial establishments meant that help was usually nearby if problems arose, while the regular presence of customers and workers provided additional deterrent against criminal activity. Internal security measures included lockable storage areas for valuables and private spaces where management could conduct business away from the public areas of the establishment. The upper floor of the Lupanare was quite different from the ground level, suggesting it served a different clientele or offered different services. The rooms upstairs were larger and more comfortable, with higher ceilings and windows that provided natural light. These spaces were decorated with more elaborate frescoes, and their size would have allowed for furniture beyond just a bed. Archaeological evidence suggests that the upper floor may have been reserved for wealthier clients who could afford more luxurious accommodations and longer visits. The difference between the two floors illustrates the economic stratification that characterized all aspects of Roman society, including commercial intimate services. The entrance to the Lupanare was marked by a distinctive stone relief that left no doubt about the building's purpose. This wasn't hidden or disguised. Romans saw no need to conceal the nature of legitimate businesses. The relief served both as advertisement and as a way to ensure that only serious customers entered the premises. Just inside the entrance, visitors would have encountered a small reception area where arrangements were made and payments collected. This space also served as a waiting area when all the rooms were occupied, which archaeological evidence suggests happened frequently during the evening hours when most Romans finished their daily work. The construction of the Lupanare reveals sophisticated understanding of urban planning and business operations. The building was positioned to be easily accessible from main thoroughfares while still maintaining some discretion. Its location near taverns, bakeries, and other commercial establishments meant that visitors could conduct their business without drawing undue attention. The narrow street on which it sat was typical of Pompeii's secondary roads, wide enough for foot traffic but too narrow for carts, creating a more intimate and pedestrian-friendly environment. This urban setting was crucial to the establishment's success, as it needed to balance accessibility with the social expectations of Roman society. The architectural features of the Lupanare also reflect practical considerations about climate and comfort. Pompeii's Mediterranean climate meant that indoor spaces could become uncomfortably warm, especially during summer months. The building's design incorporated several features to address this challenge, including small windows positioned to create cross breezes and the use of volcanic stone in construction that helped regulate indoor temperatures. The floors were typically covered with simple mosaics or tiles that were easy to clean and maintain, reflecting the practical needs of a commercial establishment that saw heavy daily use. Water supply and waste management were crucial considerations for any Roman building, but especially important for establishments like the Lupanare. Archaeological investigation has revealed sophisticated plumbing systems that provided fresh water and removed waste efficiently. These systems connected to Pompeii's broader municipal infrastructure, demonstrating that such establishments were legitimate businesses that paid taxes and received city services just like any other commercial enterprise. The integration of these buildings into the city's infrastructure tells us much about Roman attitudes toward the services they provided. The security and safety measures built into the Lupanare's design reflect both the valuable nature of the business and the potential risks involved. The building could be secured from the inside, with heavy wooden doors and bronze locks that have been preserved by the volcanic ash. The narrow corridors and small rooms meant that the interior could be controlled by a small staff, while the proximity to other businesses provided additional security through the presence of neighbors and regular foot traffic on the surrounding streets. These security measures were necessary not just to protect the workers and customers, but also to safeguard the considerable sums of money that such establishments generated. The daily operations of the Lupanare followed patterns that were both similar to and different from other Roman commercial establishments. Like shops and taverns throughout Pompeii, the establishment opened its doors in the late morning, after the morning rush of Romans heading to work, conducting business in the forum, or visiting the baths. The busiest hours typically came in the evening, after the day's work was complete and Romans sought entertainment and relaxation. This timing aligned perfectly with the rhythms of Roman daily life, which revolved around the hours of daylight and the social expectations of when different activities were appropriate. The morning routine at the Lupanar began well before the doors opened to customers, with workers and staff conducting the daily tasks necessary to maintain a clean, attractive, and efficiently functioning establishment. Rooms had to be cleaned and aired out from the previous evening's activities, with fresh linens provided and any necessary repairs or maintenance completed. The oil lamps that provided lighting had to be refilled and their wicks trimmed, while the floors throughout the building were swept and washed with water and cleaning solutions that removed stains and odors. These maintenance tasks were essential for maintaining the establishment's reputation and ensuring customer satisfaction. The procurement and preparation of supplies required for daily operations involved complex relationships with vendors and suppliers throughout Pompeii's commercial network. Food and wine had to be purchased from local merchants, as many establishments provided refreshments for their customers as part of their service offerings. Cleaning supplies, lamp oil, linens, and personal care items had to be regularly replenished from specialized suppliers who served the hospitality and service industries. Perfumes, cosmetics, and decorative items were often purchased from luxury goods merchants who imported materials from throughout the Mediterranean world. The staff hierarchy within the Lupanar included multiple levels of workers and supervisors who performed different functions necessary for successful daily operations. At the top were the managers who handled customer relations, resolved disputes, and coordinated with external suppliers and authorities. Below them were experienced workers who supervised newer employees, maintained quality standards, and handled difficult customers or situations. Support staff included cleaners, cooks, security personnel, and messengers who handled the numerous tasks required to keep the establishment functioning smoothly. The customer service protocols followed by the Lupanar reflected sophisticated understanding of hospitality industry practices and the importance of maintaining positive relationships with clientele. Customers were greeted courteously upon arrival, and their preferences and requirements discussed before services were provided. Regular customers often developed relationships with particular workers or staff members who understood their preferences and could provide personalized service that encouraged repeat visits. Complaint resolution procedures ensured that dissatisfied customers could have their concerns addressed promptly and professionally. The pricing structures used by the Lupanar were complex and reflected various factors, including the time of day, the specific services requested, the experience level of particular workers, and the economic status of customers. Base prices were established for standard services, with premium charges for specialized requests, longer visits, or exclusive access to particular workers or facilities. Repeat customers might receive discounts or other incentives to encourage loyalty, while wealthy clients could pay premium prices for enhanced privacy, luxury accommodations, or other special amenities. The record-keeping systems maintained by the Lupanar were essential for tax compliance, business planning, and legal protection in case of disputes or investigations. Daily income and expense records were maintained on wax tablets or papyrus documents that tracked customer payments, worker compensation, supply purchases, and facility maintenance costs. Employee records documented the terms of employment for each worker, including their legal status, compensation arrangements, and any special agreements or restrictions. Customer records, while less detailed for privacy reasons, might include information about regular clients' preferences, payment history, and any special arrangements. The seasonal variations in business operations reflected broader patterns in Pompeii's economy and social life that affected demand for entertainment and hospitality services. Summer months brought increased tourist traffic from Romans escaping the heat of inland cities, while harvest seasons brought temporary workers and merchants who had money to spend on entertainment. Religious festivals and public holidays created spikes in demand, while periods of political uncertainty or economic difficulty could reduce customer traffic significantly. These seasonal patterns required flexible staffing arrangements and careful financial planning to ensure year-round profitability. The management structure of the Lupanare was complex, involving multiple layers of authority and economic relationships that reflected broader patterns in Roman commerce. At the top was typically a freedman or freewoman who owned or leased the building and held the necessary licenses to operate the business. This person, known as a lino or lina depending on gender, was responsible for paying taxes, maintaining the property, and ensuring compliance with local regulations. Below the owner were supervisors who managed daily operations, handled customer relations, and maintained order within the establishment. These supervisors were often freed persons themselves, individuals who had worked their way up through the Roman economic system and now held positions of relative authority and respect. The financial arrangements within the Lupanare were surprisingly sophisticated, involving complex systems of revenue sharing, room rental, and service fees that would be recognizable to modern business owners. Workers typically paid a percentage of their earnings to the house in exchange for room, board, security, and access to the establishment's clientele. This percentage varied depending on the workers' experience, popularity, and the specific arrangements they had negotiated. Some workers were essentially independent contractors who rented space in the building, while others were employees who received a salary plus a share of their earnings. These arrangements were sometimes formalized in written contracts, fragments of which have been discovered in archaeological excavations throughout Pompeii. Customer service in the Lupanare was taken seriously, as repeat business was essential for profitability in a competitive market. Pompeii had multiple establishments offering similar services, so maintaining a good reputation was crucial for success. This meant ensuring that customers felt welcome, safe, and satisfied with their experience. The graffiti left by visitors often comments on the quality of service, the attractiveness and skill of particular workers, and their likelihood of returning. These ancient reviews provide fascinating insights into customer expectations and the standards by which such establishments were judged in Roman society. The daily routine within the Lupanar began early in the morning with cleaning and preparation. The small rooms had to be tidied, fresh linens provided, and any necessary repairs or maintenance completed. The building's water supply systems required daily attention, as did the oil lamps that provided lighting in the windowless ground floor rooms. Food and wine had to be purchased from local suppliers, as many establishments provided refreshments for their customers. These mundane details of daily operation help us understand that, despite its specialized nature, the Lupanare functioned much like any other Roman business, with regular hours, standard procedures, and consistent attention to customer satisfaction. The integration of the Lupanare into Pompeii's broader commercial ecosystem was extensive and mutually beneficial. The establishment purchased supplies from local merchants, hired services from craftsmen and repairmen, and provided employment for workers, supervisors, and support staff. This economic integration meant that the success or failure of such establishments affected the broader community, creating stakeholders who had economic incentives to support and protect these businesses. Local tavern keepers often developed referral relationships with the Lupanare, while merchants who sold luxury goods might target workers and customers from these establishments as potential clients for jewelry, cosmetics, and fine clothing. The regulatory environment governing the Lupanare was surprisingly comprehensive, reflecting Roman administrative sophistication and their practical approach to managing commerce. Imperial laws established licensing requirements, tax obligations, and operating standards that applied throughout the empire. Local magistrates were responsible for enforcing these regulations and had considerable discretion in how they implemented imperial policies. The surviving legal documents and inscriptions from Pompeii suggest that such establishments were subject to regular inspections, were required to maintain certain standards of cleanliness and safety, and had to pay substantial taxes to both local and imperial authorities. Record-keeping was an essential aspect of running the Lupanare, as Roman tax authorities required detailed documentation of income, expenses, and employee status. Archaeological excavations have uncovered fragments of wax tablets, papyrus documents, and inscribed pottery that provide glimpses into the business records maintained by these establishments. These documents reveal sophisticated accounting practices, including detailed customer records, employee contracts, and expense tracking that would be familiar to modern business owners. The preservation of these records in volcanic ash has provided historians with unprecedented insights into Roman commercial practices and the economic realities of operating such businesses. The workers in establishments like the Lupanare came from diverse backgrounds and found themselves in these positions through various circumstances that reflect the complex realities of Roman social and economic life. Some were slaves who had been purchased specifically for this purpose. Others were freed persons who had chosen this work as a way to support themselves after gaining their freedom. Still others were free-born Romans who had fallen into debt or faced other economic pressures that left them with limited options for earning a living. Understanding their stories requires us to look beyond modern assumptions and moral judgments to understand the economic and social realities of ancient Roman life. The training and preparation required for workers in the Lupanare involved both practical skills and cultural knowledge that enabled them to serve effectively the diverse clientele who frequented such establishments. New workers, whether slaves or free persons, typically underwent periods of instruction during which they learned the expectations and procedures that governed daily operations. This training included not only the obvious aspects of their work, but also customer service skills, personal hygiene and health practices, and the social protocols that governed interactions with different types of customers. More experienced workers often served as mentors to newcomers, sharing practical knowledge and providing emotional support during the adjustment period. The living arrangements for workers varied considerably depending on their legal status, economic circumstances, and the specific policies of individual establishments. Some workers lived in quarters connected to or above the Lupanar itself, while others maintained separate residences in other parts of the city. Enslaved workers typically lived in accommodations provided by their owners, which might range from comfortable private rooms to shared spaces with minimal privacy or amenities. Free workers and freed persons had more control over their living situations, but faced the challenge of finding affordable housing on the income generated by their work. The personal relationships and social networks developed by workers in the Lupanar extended far beyond their professional activities and played crucial roles in their emotional well-being and long-term security. Many workers maintained close friendships with colleagues that provided mutual support and companionship in dealing with the challenges of their profession. Some developed romantic relationships with customers that evolved beyond commercial transactions, though such relationships faced numerous practical and social obstacles. Family relationships were often complicated by the nature of their work, with some workers maintaining close ties with relatives, while others became estranged from family members who disapproved of their occupations. The health care and medical attention available to workers in the Lupanar reflected both the general state of Roman medicine and the specific health risks associated with their profession. Establishments that wanted to maintain their reputations had strong incentives to ensure that their workers remained healthy and attractive, leading some owners to employ physicians or maintain relationships with local medical practitioners. However, the quality of available medical care was limited by the state of ancient medical knowledge, and many health problems that are easily treatable today could become serious or life-threatening conditions in the ancient world. The economic opportunities and constraints faced by workers in the Lupanar varied dramatically depending on their legal status, personal circumstances, and individual talents and ambitions. Some workers were able to accumulate significant savings over time, either through regular earnings or through gifts from wealthy customers who became personally attached to them. These savings might be used to purchase freedom for enslaved workers, to establish independent businesses, or to provide security for retirement or old age. However, many workers lived paycheck to paycheck with little opportunity to save money or plan for the future. The educational backgrounds of workers in the Lupanar were surprisingly diverse, reflecting the various circumstances that brought people into such employment. Some workers were well-educated individuals who had fallen on hard times due to family misfortunes, political upheavals, or economic disasters. Others had received basic education as children but lacked the specialized skills or social connections necessary for more conventional occupations. Still others were essentially illiterate, but possessed other talents or attributes that made them successful in their chosen profession. This diversity of educational backgrounds contributed to the cosmopolitan atmosphere of many establishments and enabled them to serve customers with varying cultural and intellectual interests. The personal agency and decision-making power available to workers varied enormously depending on their legal status and individual circumstances. Enslaved workers had virtually no control over their working conditions, customer assignments, or daily schedules, though some might develop enough trust with their owners to exercise informal influence over certain aspects of their situation. Free workers and freed persons had more autonomy, but still faced significant constraints imposed by economic necessity, social expectations, and the policies of establishment owners. The most successful workers might eventually gain enough economic independence to negotiate better working conditions or even to establish their own businesses. The retirement and exit strategies available to workers in the Lupanare were limited and often uncertain, reflecting the precarious nature of employment in service industries that depended on youth, physical attractiveness, and personal charm. Some workers were able to transition to other roles within the hospitality industry, such as tavern keeping or managing other establishments. Others used their savings and connections to establish entirely different businesses or to marry into more conventional social situations. However, many workers faced bleak prospects as they aged, with limited savings, few marketable skills, and social stigma that made it difficult to find alternative employment or marriage partners. Slavery was a fundamental institution in Roman society, and many workers in establishments like the Lupanare were enslaved people who had no choice in their circumstances. These individuals might have been born into slavery, captured in military campaigns, or sold into bondage due to debt or legal penalties. For enslaved workers, their situation was entirely controlled by their owners, who decided where they worked, how they were treated, and whether they had any hope of eventually gaining their freedom. However, the Roman system of slavery was different from later forms of bondage in important ways. Slaves could own property, enter into business relationships, and sometimes earn money that could be saved toward purchasing their freedom. The process of manumission, or freeing slaves, was common in Roman society and offered hope even to those in the most difficult circumstances. Slaves who had pleased their owners, demonstrated valuable skills, or saved enough money could purchase or be granted their freedom. Once freed, these individuals became libertini or libertae, freed persons who owed certain obligations to their former owners, but were otherwise free to choose their own occupations and living arrangements. Many freed persons continued working in the same establishments where they had been enslaved, but now as employees or independent contractors rather than property. For free-born Romans, ending up working in establishments like the Lupanare usually resulted from economic necessity rather than choice. Roman society offered limited opportunities for women to support themselves independently, especially those from lower social classes. Widows without family support, women whose families had lost their fortunes, or those who had been abandoned or divorced might find themselves with few options for earning a living. While Roman law provided some protections for freeborn citizens, economic desperation could override legal safeguards, leading people to accept work they might not have chosen under better circumstances. The daily lives of workers in the Lupanare were shaped by the same concerns that affected all Romans of their social class: securing adequate food and shelter, maintaining relationships with family and friends, and hoping for a better future. Archaeological evidence suggests that workers often formed close bonds with each other, creating support networks that helped them cope with the challenges of their profession. Graffiti and other evidence indicate that these relationships sometimes extended beyond the workplace, with workers sharing meals, celebrating festivals together, and supporting each other through difficult times. The economic realities faced by workers in the Lupanar were complex and varied considerably depending on their legal status and individual circumstances. Enslaved workers received no direct payment for their services, but their owners were responsible for providing food, clothing, shelter, and basic medical care. Free workers and freed persons typically kept a percentage of their earnings, though they had to pay for their own living expenses. The most successful workers could accumulate substantial savings over time, sometimes enough to purchase their own establishments or retire to more conventional occupations. Health and safety were constant concerns for workers in the Lupanar, as they were for all Romans, but the nature of their work created additional risks and challenges. Roman medicine was primitive by modern standards, and understanding of disease transmission was limited. Workers were vulnerable to various health problems, and access to medical care depended largely on their economic circumstances and the generosity of their employers. Some establishments employed physicians or maintained relationships with local doctors, while others relied on traditional remedies and the knowledge of experienced workers to address health issues. The social status of workers in establishments like the Lupanar was complicated and contradictory, reflecting broader tensions in Roman society between legal categories and social realities. While their work carried social stigma that could affect their ability to marry respectably or participate fully in community life, many workers were able to maintain relationships with family members and friends outside their profession. Some achieved considerable economic success and social influence within their own communities, while others remained marginalized throughout their lives. Legal protections for workers in the Lupanar varied dramatically depending on their status as slaves, freed persons, or freeborn citizens. Roman law provided extensive protections for free citizens, including the right to legal representation, protection from physical abuse, and the ability to enter into contracts. However, these legal protections were often meaningless for those without the economic resources to enforce them or the social connections to access the legal system effectively. Enslaved workers had virtually no legal protections beyond their owner's economic interest in preserving their property. The pathways out of working in the Lupanar were limited but not non-existent, and understanding these options helps illustrate both the constraints and possibilities that existed within Roman society. Some workers were able to save enough money to retire from the profession and establish themselves in other occupations. Others married clients or other Romans who were willing to support them in different lifestyles. A few achieved the ultimate Roman dream of upward social mobility, using their earnings and connections to establish businesses or acquire property that allowed them to join the ranks of respectable Roman merchants or property owners. The customer base of the Lupanar represented a cross-section of Roman society, though not all social classes participated equally or in the same ways. The establishment's two-story design catered to different economic levels, with the ground floor serving working-class Romans, freed persons, and slaves who had saved enough money for an occasional visit, while the upper floor attracted wealthier clients who could afford more luxurious accommodations and services. This economic segmentation reflected broader patterns in Roman commerce, where most businesses offered different price points and service levels to attract customers from various social strata. The timing of customer visits followed predictable patterns that reflected the rhythms of Roman daily life and the social expectations that governed when different activities were considered appropriate. Most customers arrived during the late afternoon and evening hours, after completing their daily work obligations, but before the evening meal that typically marked the end of the Roman social day. Weekend and holiday periods saw increased traffic, as Romans have more leisure time and disposable income for entertainment activities. The evening rush period, roughly corresponding to modern happy hour, was the busiest time for most establishments and required additional staff and careful management to handle the increased demand. The geographic origins of customers reflected Pompeii's role as a major commercial and transportation hub that attracted visitors from throughout the Roman world. Local residents formed the core customer base, but significant numbers of travelers, merchants, and temporary workers also patronized the establishment during their stays in the city. Military personnel from nearby bases were frequent customers, as were sailors and maritime workers whose ships used Pompeii's port facilities. The international character of the customer base required establishments to accommodate diverse cultural expectations and language preferences that reflected the cosmopolitan nature of Roman urban life. The social etiquette and behavioral expectations that governed customer conduct in the Lupanare were well understood by regular patrons, but might require explanation for newcomers or foreign visitors unfamiliar with Roman customs. Customers were expected to treat workers with basic courtesy and respect, even though the commercial nature of the relationship created obvious power imbalances. Violence or abusive behavior was not tolerated and could result in ejection from the establishment or even legal consequences if complaints were filed with local magistrates. Payment was expected to be prompt and in the agreed-upon amounts, with disputes over pricing or services resolved through establishment management rather than direct confrontation. The discretion and privacy concerns of customers varied considerably depending on their social status and personal circumstances, with some clients requiring complete anonymity while others were unconcerned about public knowledge of their activities. Wealthy or politically prominent customers might use pseudonyms, visit during off-peak hours, or employ intermediaries to arrange their visits in order to avoid compromising their public reputations. Working-class customers generally had fewer privacy concerns, though married men might still prefer to visit during times when they were less likely to encounter neighbors or business associates. The repeat customer phenomenon was crucial to the financial success of establishments like the Lupanare, as regular clients provided steady income and helped maintain occupancy rates during slower periods. These customers often developed preferences for particular workers or services and were willing to pay premium prices for guaranteed access during busy periods. Establishment management cultivated these relationships through various loyalty programs and special services that encouraged long-term customer retention while generating higher per-visit revenues from their most valuable clients. The payment methods accepted by the Lupanare reflected the monetary systems and commercial practices of the Roman economy, with most transactions conducted using standard imperial coinage, though barter arrangements were sometimes accepted for customers with limited cash resources. Prices were typically quoted in sesterti or denarii, the standard Roman silver and bronze coins, though wealthy customers might pay using gold aurii for premium services. Credit arrangements were possible for well-known regular customers, though most establishments preferred immediate payment to avoid collection problems and cash flow difficulties. The customer complaint resolution procedures developed by successful establishments reflected sophisticated understanding of hospitality industry practices and the importance of maintaining positive customer relationships. Dissatisfied customers could discuss their concerns with management, who had authority to provide refunds, offer compensatory services, or make other adjustments to resolve disputes satisfactorily. Serious complaints might be escalated to establishment owners, while persistent problems with particular workers or services would be addressed through additional training, policy changes, or personnel decisions designed to prevent future difficulties. The seasonal patterns in customer behavior reflected broader economic and social cycles that affected discretionary spending throughout Roman society. Harvest seasons brought agricultural workers and merchants with extra income to spend on entertainment, while summer months attracted tourists and seasonal workers who contributed to increased demand for hospitality services. Religious festivals and public holidays created spikes in customer traffic, though certain religious observances might temporarily reduce demand as Romans focused on family and spiritual activities rather than commercial entertainment. Roman soldiers stationed in the region were frequent customers of the Lupanare, as they were of similar establishments throughout the empire. Military service provided regular pay and limited opportunities for spending money on other forms of entertainment, making soldiers reliable customers for businesses that offered pleasure and companionship. The graffiti left by soldiers in the Lupanar often includes references to their military units, home provinces, and length of service, providing historians with valuable information about Roman military organization and the experiences of individual servicemen. Merchants and traders visiting Pompeii on business formed another important customer segment for the Lupanar. These men were often away from home for extended periods, had disposable income from their commercial activities, and sought entertainment and companionship during their stays in the city. The international nature of Roman trade meant that customers might come from anywhere in the Mediterranean world, bringing diverse cultural backgrounds and expectations that establishments had to accommodate to remain competitive. Local Romans from various social backgrounds also patronized the Lupanare, though their participation patterns differed significantly based on their economic circumstances and social status. Wealthy Romans might visit the upper floor establishments occasionally, treating them as one option among many for entertainment and pleasure. Working-class Romans and freed persons were more likely to be regular customers of the ground floor rooms, viewing these visits as an important part of their social lives and personal relationships. The social dynamics within the Lupanare reflected and reinforced broader Roman attitudes about class, power, and personal relationships. Customers expected to be treated with deference and respect appropriate to their social status, and establishments that failed to maintain these hierarchical relationships could quickly lose business. However, the commercial nature of these interactions also created opportunities for more egalitarian relationships than might exist elsewhere in Roman society, as successful workers could accumulate wealth and influence that transcended their formal social status. Customer expectations in the Lupanare went beyond the obvious services to include companionship, conversation, and emotional connection that many Romans found difficult to obtain in their conventional social relationships. The rigid hierarchies and formal protocols that governed most Roman social interactions were relaxed somewhat in commercial establishments, allowing for more intimate and personal connections. Many of the graffiti messages left by customers express genuine affection and emotional attachment to particular workers, suggesting that these relationships often involved more than simple commercial transactions. The economic relationship between customers and the Lupanare was straightforward in principle, but complex in practice, involving various payment methods, service options, and pricing structures that reflected the diverse needs and circumstances of the clientele. Wealthy customers might pay premium prices for exclusive access to the upper floor rooms and particular workers, while working-class customers could access basic services at lower prices during off-peak hours. Some customers established ongoing relationships with particular workers or establishments, paying regular fees for preferential treatment or guaranteed access during busy periods. The social consequences of patronizing establishments like the Lupanar varied dramatically depending on a customer's social status, family circumstances, and community position. For unmarried men, especially those from lower social classes, such visits were considered normal and unremarkable aspects of adult life. Married men from the upper classes had to be more discreet, not because their activities were considered immoral, but because public knowledge of their private entertainments could affect their political careers and family relationships. The Roman concept of dignitas, or personal honor, required that public figures maintain certain appearances, even when their private behavior was widely known and accepted. Repeat customers developed ongoing relationships with the Lupanar and its workers that could last for years or even decades. These relationships often evolved beyond simple commercial transactions to include elements of friendship, emotional support, and mutual loyalty that benefited both parties. Long-term customers might provide financial support to their favorite workers during difficult times, while workers might offer advice, companionship, and emotional support that customers couldn't find elsewhere in their lives. These relationships illustrate the human capacity to create meaningful connections even within commercial frameworks. The artistic and cultural evidence preserved in the Lupanar provides unprecedented insights into Roman attitudes toward intimacy, pleasure, and human relationships that complement and sometimes contradict the formal literary and legal sources that traditionally formed the basis of historical understanding. The frescoes, graffiti, and decorative elements found throughout the building create a vivid picture of how ordinary Romans thought about and experienced these aspects of their lives, offering perspectives that are often missing from sources created by and for the elite classes. The frescoes in the Lupanar served multiple purposes beyond simple decoration, functioning as advertisements, instruction manuals, and artistic expressions that reflected both Roman artistic traditions and the specific needs of commercial establishments. These paintings were created by professional artists who worked throughout Pompeii, decorating homes, shops, and public buildings. The artistic quality varies considerably, from sophisticated works that demonstrate advanced technique and aesthetic sensibility to simpler paintings that prioritize clarity and functionality over artistic merit. The subjects depicted in these frescoes draw on established Roman artistic traditions while adapting them for the specific context of commercial, intimate establishments. The iconographic program of the Lupanar's frescoes reflects sophisticated understanding of Roman religious and cultural symbolism, incorporating images and themes that would have been immediately recognizable to contemporary viewers. Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, appears frequently, often accompanied by her traditional symbols such as roses, doves, and marine imagery. Priapus, a deity associated with fertility and protection, also features prominently, often depicted in ways that emphasized his protective role for the establishment and its occupants. These religious references weren't merely decorative, but served important cultural functions, connecting the activities within the building to broader Roman religious and social traditions. The graffiti in the Lupanar represents one of the largest and most diverse collections of ancient Roman informal writing ever discovered, providing direct access to the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of ordinary people who rarely appear in formal historical sources. These inscriptions were made by customers, workers, and visitors over several decades, creating a palimpsest of human experience that chronicles the daily life of the establishment. The messages range from simple names and dates to elaborate poems and detailed accounts of personal experiences, offering insights into Roman literacy, emotional expression, and social relationships. The linguistic diversity of the Lupanare's graffiti reflects Pompeii's cosmopolitan character and the international nature of Roman commercial networks. While most inscriptions are in Latin, others appear in Greek, Oscan, and other languages spoken throughout the Roman world. This multilingual environment tells us much about the cultural diversity of both customers and workers, and suggests that successful establishments had to accommodate clients from many different cultural backgrounds. The presence of inscriptions in multiple scripts also indicates relatively high levels of literacy among various social groups, challenging traditional assumptions about education and literacy in the ancient world. The content of the graffiti provides fascinating insights into Roman emotional life and personal relationships that are rarely preserved in formal literary sources. Many inscriptions express genuine affection and emotional attachment, describing relationships that clearly extended beyond simple commercial transactions. Others record complaints, disappointments, and negative experiences that provide balance to the more positive depictions. Still others are humorous, crude, or purely factual, recording dates, prices, and practical information that illuminates the business operations of the establishment. The artistic techniques and materials used in creating the Lupanar's frescoes demonstrate sophisticated understanding of Roman painting traditions and the specific challenges of decorating commercial spaces. The artists employed a range of pigments and techniques that were designed to withstand heavy use and the humid conditions created by numerous occupants in small spaces. The paintings show evidence of regular maintenance and occasional repainting, indicating that the establishment's owners invested considerable resources in maintaining an attractive and welcoming environment for their customers. The preservation of the Lupanare's artistic and written evidence in volcanic ash has created an unparalleled archaeological record that allows modern scholars to study Roman commercial and social life with unprecedented detail and accuracy. The rapid burial of the building meant that organic materials, fragile paintings, and temporary inscriptions that would normally have been lost to time were preserved exactly as they existed on the day of the eruption. This preservation has allowed archaeologists to reconstruct not just the physical appearance of the building, but also the daily activities, social relationships, and cultural attitudes that shaped life within its walls. The cultural significance of the artistic program in the Lupanar extends beyond its immediate commercial function to reflect broader Roman attitudes toward art, religion, and social life. The integration of high-quality artistic work into a commercial establishment demonstrates that Romans didn't separate aesthetic and commercial concerns in the way that later societies would. Beautiful and meaningful art was considered appropriate and valuable in all contexts, not just in the homes of the wealthy or in public buildings. This attitude reflects a more integrated approach to culture and commerce that characterized Roman society at its height. When we compare Pompeii's Lupanare to similar establishments discovered in other Roman cities, we can better understand both the common features that characterized such businesses throughout the empire and the local variations that reflected different cultural, economic, and legal environments. Archaeological excavations in Rome, Ostia, Ephesus, and other major Roman cities have uncovered numerous examples of commercial intimate establishments that share basic architectural and operational features while displaying interesting differences in scale, decoration, and organization. The Lupanar in Rome itself, located in the Subura district near the Forum, was considerably larger and more elaborate than its Pompeian counterpart, reflecting the capital city's greater size, wealth, and diverse population. Literary sources describe Roman establishments that employed dozens of workers, occupied multiple buildings, and catered to customers from across the social spectrum, from slaves to senators. The scale of these operations required more sophisticated management structures and generated substantial tax revenues for the imperial government, making them important components of the urban economy. In port cities like Ostia and Ephesus, commercial intimate establishments were closely integrated with the maritime economy, serving sailors, merchants, and travelers who formed a significant portion of their customer base. These establishments often featured multilingual signage and staff, accommodated diverse cultural preferences and expectations, and maintained connections with similar businesses in other ports throughout the Mediterranean. The international character of these port city establishments created cosmopolitan environments that influenced local culture and contributed to the spread of ideas and practices throughout the Roman world. The legal and regulatory environment governing such establishments varied considerably throughout the Roman Empire, reflecting local traditions, imperial policies, and changing social attitudes over time. In some provinces, local laws imposed additional restrictions or requirements beyond imperial regulations, while in others, local magistrates took more liberal approaches to enforcement. These variations created different business environments that affected everything from pricing and service offerings to architectural design and marketing strategies. The social status and cultural significance of commercial intimate establishments also varied throughout the Roman world, influenced by local religious traditions, cultural attitudes, and economic conditions. In cities with strong Greek cultural influences, such establishments were often more integrated into broader cultural and social life, while in regions with more conservative traditions, they might be more marginalized or subject to greater social disapproval. These cultural variations created different experiences for both workers and customers and influenced the long-term development of Roman social attitudes. The economic impact of such establishments on their local communities was substantial throughout the Roman world, though the specific nature of this impact varied depending on local conditions and regulations. In addition to providing direct employment for workers and support staff, these businesses created demand for goods and services from numerous other industries, from food and wine suppliers to textile manufacturers and construction workers. The taxes paid by these establishments contributed significantly to municipal revenues, funding public works projects, festivals, and other community amenities. The architectural evolution of commercial intimate establishments throughout the Roman period reflects changing social attitudes, economic conditions, and urban planning practices that influence city development across the empire. Early establishments were often converted residential buildings or simple commercial spaces, while later examples show sophisticated, purpose-built designs that maximized efficiency and customer satisfaction. This architectural evolution parallels broader trends in Roman commercial and urban development and demonstrates the integration of such businesses into the mainstream of Roman economic life. The religious and cultural associations of commercial intimate establishments varied significantly throughout the Roman world, influenced by local deities, religious traditions, and cultural practices. In some regions, such establishments were closely associated with fertility cults and religious festivals, while in others, they were viewed as purely commercial enterprises with minimal religious significance. These religious associations affected everything from architectural decoration and ritual practices to the social status of workers and the attitudes of customers and communities. The decline and transformation of commercial intimate establishments in different parts of the Roman world provides insights into broader social, economic, and cultural changes that affected the empire during its later centuries. In some regions, changing religious attitudes led to increased restrictions and social disapproval, while in others, economic decline reduced demand for such services. The rise of Christianity brought new moral perspectives that gradually transformed Roman attitudes toward intimacy and commercial relationships, though this process occurred at different rates and in different ways throughout the empire. The archaeological evidence from commercial intimate establishments throughout the Roman world has revolutionized modern understanding of ancient social and economic life, challenging previous assumptions and providing new insights into the daily experiences of ordinary Romans. The discovery and study of these sites has required archaeologists and historians to develop new methodological approaches that can handle sensitive subject matter while maintaining scholarly objectivity and respect for the human experiences being studied. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius on August 24, 79 AD, began a sequence of events that would preserve the Lupanar and the rest of Pompeii for nearly 2 millennia, creating one of the most important archaeological sites in the world and providing unprecedented insights into Roman daily life. The volcanic catastrophe struck during the busy season when the city was full of residents, visitors, and temporary workers who had come for the harvest and various commercial activities. The timing of the eruption meant that the Lupanar was likely operating normally, with customers and workers going about their daily routines when disaster struck. The initial signs of the eruption appeared several days before the catastrophic events of August 24th, with small earthquakes and minor volcanic activity that many Pompeians initially dismissed as normal occurrences. The region around Vesuvius had experienced frequent seismic activity for years, and previous earthquakes had caused damage that was still being repaired when the volcano finally exploded. This familiarity with earth tremors may have caused residents to underestimate the danger they faced, contributing to the high casualty rate when the major eruption began. When Vesuvius finally erupted with full force, it sent a column of ash, rock, and gases more than 20 miles high into the atmosphere, creating a mushroom cloud that was visible from hundreds of miles away. The initial phase of the eruption rained pumice stones and ash down on Pompeii, accumulating at a rate of several inches per hour. This pumice fall continued for approximately 18 hours, burying the ground floors of buildings throughout the city and making movement increasingly difficult for anyone trying to escape. The Lupanar, being a relatively low building on a narrow street, would have been particularly vulnerable to this accumulation of volcanic debris. The people inside the Lupanar during the eruption faced the same terrible choices that confronted all Pompeians: stay inside and risk being buried alive, or venture outside into the deadly rain of hot pumice and ash. Archaeological evidence suggests that some occupants of the building attempted to shelter in place, while others may have tried to flee during the early hours of the eruption when escape was still theoretically possible. The narrow streets around the Lupanar would have quickly become impassable as pumice accumulated, trapping anyone who had delayed their escape too long. The second phase of the eruption brought pyroclastic flows, superheated currents of gas, ash, and rock that raced down the slopes of Vesuvius at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. These flows, with temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, killed anyone they encountered instantly and buried the remaining structures of Pompeii under additional layers of volcanic material. The speed and heat of these flows meant that many victims were preserved exactly as they were at the moment of death, creating the haunting human casts that have made Pompeii famous throughout the world. The volcanic material that buried the Lupanar created unique preservation conditions that maintained not only the building structure, but also organic materials, delicate frescoes, and even temporary inscriptions that would normally have disappeared within years of their creation. The fine ash that filled the building created airtight seals that prevented decay, while the rapid burial meant that looters and natural weathering couldn't damage the site. This preservation was so complete that archaeologists have been able to reconstruct not just the physical appearance of the building, but also details of daily life and individual human experiences with unprecedented accuracy. The immediate aftermath of the eruption saw the complete abandonment of the Pompeii region as the thick layer of volcanic debris made the area uninhabitable and economically worthless. Unlike some natural disasters that allow for rebuilding and recovery, the Vesuvius eruption so completely transformed the landscape that survivors had no choice but to relocate permanently. The Roman government made some attempts to organize relief efforts and resettle refugees, but the scale of the disaster was beyond the capacity of ancient emergency response systems. The burial of Pompeii was so complete that within a generation, the exact location of the city had been forgotten, existing only in historical records and the memories of survivors and their descendants. Medieval and Renaissance scholars knew that a city called Pompeii had existed somewhere in the region, but centuries of agriculture and development had obscured all surface traces of the ancient settlement. This complete burial, while tragic for the original inhabitants, proved fortunate for modern archaeology, as it meant the site was protected from the damage and disturbance that affected most ancient Roman sites. The rediscovery of Pompeii began in the 18th century when workers digging a canal accidentally uncovered ancient walls and artifacts. Initial excavations were more treasure hunting than scientific archaeology, focusing on recovering valuable objects and impressive artworks rather than understanding the site as a complete urban environment. These early excavations damaged many structures and destroyed valuable archaeological information, but they also generated enormous public interest in the site and provided the financial support necessary for more systematic investigation. The scientific study of Pompeii's commercial intimate establishments, including the Lupanar, began in the 19th century, as archaeologists developed more systematic approaches to excavation and documentation. However, Victorian moral sensibilities complicated this work, as many scholars were uncomfortable with the explicit nature of much of the evidence they encountered. Some frescoes and artifacts were hidden away in restricted collections, while others were damaged or destroyed by embarrassed excavators who considered them inappropriate for public viewing. Archaeological discoveries at the Lupanar have revolutionized modern understanding of Roman social and economic life, providing concrete evidence about aspects of ancient society that were previously known only through scattered literary references and legal documents. The building has yielded thousands of artifacts, inscriptions, and architectural features that illuminate everything from pricing structures and customer preferences to the daily experiences of individual workers and visitors. This evidence has allowed historians to move beyond generalizations and moral judgments to develop nuanced understanding of how these establishments actually functioned within Roman society. The excavation of the Lupanar required archaeologists to develop new methodological approaches that could handle sensitive subject matter while maintaining scholarly objectivity and respect for the human experiences being studied. Traditional archaeological techniques had to be adapted to preserve delicate frescoes, record ephemeral graffiti, and document spatial relationships that revealed patterns of use and behavior. The interdisciplinary nature of this research brought together archaeologists, historians, art historians, sociologists, and other specialists who could contribute different perspectives and expertise to understanding the site. The preservation challenges faced by the Lupanar reflect broader issues affecting all of Pompeii, as exposure to air, water, and tourism gradually damages structures that survived nearly 2,000 years of burial. The delicate frescoes that provide so much information about Roman life are particularly vulnerable to environmental damage, requiring constant conservation efforts to maintain their legibility and artistic integrity. Modern conservation techniques have been developed specifically to address these challenges, but the ongoing preservation of the site requires substantial financial resources and technical expertise. The digital documentation of the Lupanar represents a major advancement in archaeological methodology, using advanced photography, 3D scanning, and computer modeling to create precise records that can be studied and shared without further damaging the original site. These digital archives allow researchers worldwide to study the evidence in detail while reducing the need for physical access that could harm fragile structures and artifacts. The development of virtual reality and other immersive technologies promises to make this evidence even more accessible to scholars and the general public. The ethical considerations involved in studying and presenting evidence from the Lupanar reflect broader questions about how modern societies should approach sensitive aspects of ancient history. Scholars must balance historical accuracy and educational value against concerns about sensationalism and respect for the human dignity of ancient people whose private lives have been preserved by archaeological accident. These ethical considerations have led to ongoing debates about appropriate ways to present this evidence in museums, educational materials, and popular media. The interdisciplinary research conducted at the Lupanar has produced insights that extend far beyond the specific site to illuminate broader patterns of Roman social and economic organization. Studies of the graffiti have revealed information about literacy rates, linguistic diversity, and patterns of emotional expression that apply throughout the Roman world. Analysis of the architectural remains has provided insights into Roman construction techniques, urban planning principles, and commercial building design that influence understanding of ancient cities throughout the Mediterranean. The ongoing research at the Lupanar continues to yield new discoveries and insights as improved techniques allow archaeologists to extract more information from previously excavated materials. Recent chemical analysis of wall plasters has revealed information about pigments and painting techniques, while microscopic examination of organic residues has provided evidence about perfumes, foods, and other materials used in the building. These scientific approaches are revolutionizing understanding of ancient daily life and will continue to provide new insights for generations to come. The cultural impact of the Lupanar extends far beyond academic archaeology to influence popular understanding of ancient Rome and shape contemporary discussions about intimacy, commerce, and social relationships. The building has appeared in countless books, documentaries, and educational programs that seek to explain Roman civilization to modern audiences. However, this popular attention has sometimes led to sensationalized or inaccurate presentations that emphasize the exotic or scandalous aspects of the evidence while ignoring its broader historical significance. The representation of the Lupanar in popular media reflects broader cultural attitudes about ancient Rome and reveals much about contemporary values and assumptions regarding intimacy and commercial relationships. Some presentations treat the building as evidence of Roman moral corruption or social dysfunction, while others romanticize it as evidence of greater sexual freedom and tolerance than exists in modern societies. Both approaches tend to impose contemporary moral frameworks on ancient evidence rather than trying to understand Roman society on its own terms.
The educational value of the Lupanar lies not in its sensational aspects, but in its ability to illuminate the complex realities of ancient social and economic life that are often obscured in traditional historical sources.
The building provides concrete evidence about how ordinary Romans lived, worked, and related to each other in ways that complement and sometimes contradict the idealized presentations found in literary and artistic sources. This evidence helps create more balanced and realistic understanding of ancient society that acknowledges both its achievements and its limitations. The feminist scholarly perspectives that have emerged in recent decades have provided new frameworks for understanding the evidence from the Lupanar that move beyond traditional approaches focused primarily on male customers and owners. These perspectives examine the experiences and agency of female workers, consider the economic and social constraints that shaped their lives, and analyze the ways in which gender relationships were constructed and maintained in ancient commercial contexts. This scholarship has revealed the complex ways in which women navigated limited options to create meaningful lives and relationships within restrictive social systems. The comparative studies that place the Lupanar within broader Mediterranean and ancient world contexts have revealed both the distinctive features of Roman commercial intimate establishments and the common patterns that characterized such institutions across different cultures and time periods. These comparisons illuminate the ways in which economic necessity, social organization, and cultural values combined to create similar institutions in different societies, while also revealing the specific features that made Roman approaches distinctive. The influence of discoveries at the Lupanar on contemporary social and political discussions demonstrates the continued relevance of ancient evidence for understanding modern issues. Debates about the regulation of intimate commerce, the economic rights of workers, and the relationship between personal relationships and commercial transactions all draw on historical precedents and examples that include evidence from ancient Roman establishments.
This contemporary relevance ensures that research on the Lupanar will continue to attract public interest and academic attention.
The technological innovations developed for studying the Lupanar have had broader applications in archaeology and historical research, contributing to advances in conservation techniques, digital documentation methods, and interdisciplinary research approaches. The challenges of preserving and studying delicate ancient materials have led to innovations in chemical analysis, digital imaging, and environmental monitoring that benefit archaeological projects throughout the world. These technological developments represent an important legacy of Pompeii research that extends far beyond the specific site. The international collaboration in studying the Lupanar reflects the global nature of modern archaeological research and demonstrates how ancient sites can bring together scholars from different countries and disciplines in pursuit of common understanding. Italian authorities have worked with researchers from universities and museums throughout the world to develop comprehensive research programs that maximize the scholarly value of the evidence while ensuring proper conservation and protection of the site itself. The future research directions for the Lupanar include continued application of new scientific techniques, expanded comparative studies with similar sites throughout the Mediterranean, and ongoing efforts to develop more sophisticated theoretical frameworks for understanding ancient social and economic relationships. As archaeological methods continue to advance, researchers expect to extract additional information from previously excavated materials and to discover new aspects of ancient life that are currently unknown or poorly understood. The legacy of the Lupanar in shaping modern understanding of ancient Rome demonstrates how archaeological discoveries can fundamentally transform historical knowledge and challenge long-held assumptions about past societies. The building has provided concrete evidence that has required scholars to reconsider traditional approaches to Roman history and to develop more nuanced and comprehensive understanding of ancient social and economic life. This transformation of scholarly understanding illustrates the ongoing value of archaeological research and the importance of preserving ancient sites for future study. In reflecting on what we've learned from our journey through ancient Pompeii's most notorious establishment, we can see how the Lupanar serves as a window into the complex realities of Roman life that extends far beyond its obvious commercial purpose. The building and its contents reveal the economic pressures, social relationships, cultural values, and human experiences that shaped daily life in one of history's most influential civilizations. Through careful archaeological investigation and scholarly analysis, we can move beyond sensationalism and moral judgment to develop genuine understanding of how ancient people lived, worked, and related to each other in circumstances very different from our own. The evidence preserved in the Lupanar challenges us to confront the complexities and contradictions of Roman society, acknowledging both its remarkable achievements and its serious limitations. The same civilization that created magnificent architecture, sophisticated legal systems, and extensive trade networks also accepted slavery, limited women's rights, and created economic systems that left many people with severely restricted options for supporting themselves. Understanding these contradictions helps us develop more realistic and nuanced perspectives on ancient societies, while also recognizing patterns and problems that continue to influence modern life. The human stories preserved in the graffiti, artifacts, and architectural remains of the Lupanar remind us that archaeological sites are not just collections of ancient objects, but records of real human lives and experiences. The people who worked and visited this establishment 2,000 years ago faced many of the same fundamental challenges that confront people today. The need to earn a living, the desire for companionship and affection, the hope for a better future, and the struggle to maintain dignity and meaning in difficult circumstances. Recognizing these common human experiences helps bridge the gap between ancient and modern worlds while respecting the specific historical contexts that shaped ancient lives. The preservation of the Lupanar by the Vesuvius eruption represents both a tragedy and an extraordinary opportunity for modern understanding. The same volcanic disaster that ended thousands of lives also created an unparalleled archaeological record that allows us to study ancient society with unprecedented detail and accuracy. This preservation carries with it a responsibility to use the evidence respectfully and constructively, honoring the memory of the ancient people whose lives were lost while extracting maximum educational and scholarly value from their preserved remains. As we conclude our exploration of what it was like to visit a commercial, intimate establishment in ancient Pompeii, we can appreciate how this single building illuminates broader patterns of human behavior, social organization, and cultural development that extend far beyond its specific historical context. The Lupanar serves as a reminder that human societies have always grappled with questions about personal relationships, economic necessity, and social organization, and that understanding how past societies addressed these challenges can provide valuable perspectives on contemporary issues and decisions. The ongoing research and conservation efforts at Pompeii ensure that the Lupanar and other ancient sites will continue to provide insights and inspiration for future generations of scholars and students. As archaeological techniques continue to advance and new theoretical frameworks emerge, we can expect that our understanding of ancient Roman society will continue to evolve and deepen, revealing new aspects of human experience and challenging us to reconsider our assumptions about both past and present. Thanks for watching this video. Good night!